Am I the jerk for reacting so strongly to a Halloween prank and then ignoring her, even though it was supposed to be all in good fun? October 14, 2021. I, a 22-year-old man, have been with Nicole, a 25-year-old woman, for a couple of years now. She's always been interested in survival stuff, weaponry and all that. I absolutely am not. I had really bad experiences with knives when I was younger, and Nicole knows about them. We both love Halloween and usually throw a party, dress up, goof around, cook pumpkin seeds, and watch movies. Anyway, the point is Nicole loves doing tricks with her knives, like 5-finger fillet, flicking it open and closed, or twirling it. She'll do this while we're watching a show or movie together, even though I've asked her not to. She also buys new knives, shows them off, and asks if I want to be the first to try it and pouts when I say no. 2 days ago, she was playing with a knife again, and I asked why she keeps forgetting my request. She got upset and said, "Wow, okay, don't insult my intelligence again." She also said it was just a knife, not a big deal, and not important enough to remember. After that, she put the knife away, and we continued to have an okay night, but I was on edge and jumpy whenever she touched me. Yesterday, Nicole called me into the kitchen where she was playing 5-finger fillet. I startled her, and she pretended to mess up badly. I lost control, screamed, tried to shout first aid instructions, and raced to grab my phone in a complete panic to dial 911. Then she started laughing and showed me it was a prank with red food dye and a carrot. Nicole laughed and said I would have known it was a joke if I wasn't so scared of knives. She claimed it was proof I needed to get more comfortable with them, explaining that anyone with basic knowledge would know it didn't look real. She kept explaining how she did it, how she practiced and offered to show me, but I couldn't respond. It felt like my head was underwater and my heart was pounding. I moved automatically, grabbed my keys and drove a few blocks away before pulling over to breathe. Nicole tried to call me and the first thing I said was, "It wasn't funny at all." She asked, "Are you crying?" And I hung up on her. She kept texting me, saying she was sorry, that she didn't think I'd react so badly to a joke, that it was just meant to be good fun in the Halloween spirit. I ignored her. I texted her after that I was home but ignored everything else. This morning she sent the picture of the props to the group chat with a few of our mutual friends, and they chimed in saying it doesn't even look real. I've muted the chat since and I'm wondering if I have a leg to stand on before I go back and apologize. Update 1, October 16, 2021. I'm not sure how to handle this, but I don't think it's appropriate to post on Am I the A due to their rules and the length. So here's an update on my situation. Much of the conversation is paraphrased with quotes that stood out to me. I've added to this as things developed, and I'm running on no sleep, so I apologize if it's unclear. I reached out to Nicole again yesterday to talk, intending to stand my ground and explain my side. She greeted me with, "Thanks for gracing me with your presence," and asked if I was ready to act my age and talk like an adult. She slammed the door behind me and pointed to the couch to discuss things. Nicole began by saying my reaction was unreasonable and out of line given the situation. I told her things need to change because the prank wasn't okay, especially since she knows I have issues with knife violence. I asked, what was funny about the prank? She interrupted, saying ultimatums aren't part of a relationship. So I said, I don't think this is working out for us. I don't think we're happy together. Nicole froze at first, and I started to explain that our different views on knives are unfair to both of us. She kept asking, so you're going to break up nearly 3 years just because of this? I tried to tell her it was more than just this issue. It was everything else, like how she keeps forgetting and triggering me. I explained that while she loves playing with knives, it upsets me. But she interrupted, yelling that I must think she's an idiot and that I must be the best actor in the world since she never knew I felt so horrible. She sarcastically suggested I call the cops for abuse, offering me her phone repeatedly and saying, "Go on, call." When I said we just needed to talk, she interrupted again, insisting that no cop would arrest her for a joke. I'm not very tall, about 5'9", and she's around 5'6", but she was standing right in front of me while I was seated, making it impossible to get up without moving her. After throwing her phone on the couch next to me, she stormed into the kitchen shouting that she should get rid of all her knives because I'm so terrified. She threw a few into the sink and then the whole block of knives into the trash, the whole time asking, "What about this one? Too sharp, too scary." When I flinched at the noises, Nicole sarcastically said, "Oh, do you feel threatened? How do you think I feel when I have to defend myself against your feelings?" She told me to stop crying, accusing me of using tears to manipulate her, and mocked me when I said, "Please stop." She complained that she has to walk on eggshells because she has a boyfriend who can't handle a joke without running off. She added, "It's not hard to not overreact, just think before you go crazy, it's that simple." She found it ridiculous that a grown man can't handle a knife or a gun and accused me of holding onto my victimhood because anyone normal would have gotten over it by now. It's been nearly 9 years. She called me stubborn and childish for picking this hill to die on, that I'm not innocent. It's not fair that I'm allowed to ignore her for hours but she can't have a little fun, and is my ego really that big? It's sickening that I don't trust her or think she's smart or skilled enough to handle a knife properly, and it's sexist, infantilizing and insulting. At one point, I mentioned that I needed to go home, and suddenly she changed her tone. She told me to stop crying because she hates it when I cry. Then she joked, or at least I think she was joking because she laughed, saying, "I guess we won't be going on hibachi dates anymore, huh? And I should probably take the knives out of the trash now, shouldn't I?" She apologized and said since it means so much to me she'll put in more effort. She admitted that I'm such a sensitive guy that if she stopped doing everything that made me uncomfortable she wouldn't be able to do anything. She pointed out that I cried watching my girl the other day as proof that I'm overly emotional, and it made sense that she thought I was just being my normal self, but she was sorry for not realizing sooner it was really upsetting me. She promised she would do her best not to bring the knives out when I'm around. Nicole hugged me and told me to let go. "We can get through this, there's nothing we can't get over." And asked for a chance to start over, fresh start tomorrow, no more jokes. It's stupid but I just said yes. I wanted to go home, get out of her house and leave while she was still acting nice, and I didn't hold my ground. I feel like an idiot and a coward. I got home and puked and couldn't get to sleep again. Today, Nicole came by and brought me lunch and coffee. She gave me a kiss and said she loved me, and all the older ladies at the office were talking about how cute we are together. I'm planning to talk to one of my closer friends and the friend who set us up to find out when Nicole got so interested in knives. I remember about 7-8 months in, shortly after our camping trip and around her birthday, she asked for a specific knife as a present. But I can't recall anything major about knives before then. I'm planning to officially break up with her tomorrow with the help of one of my friends, so I can get my stuff from her place. It's overwhelming how much of a response this got, and I tried to read all of your comments. Some of them made me laugh, some warmed my heart, others had very hard truths that I still needed to hear, no matter how raw it left me. There are a lot of repeating questions and assumptions. First, we don't live together. At this point I don't think we ever will. Second, I stayed primarily because the good seemed to outweigh the bad. You remember the negatives more than the positive, so obviously I just had to remember her positive qualities instead of being swayed by my focus on the bad times. Plus it was always almost perfect after we had a fight, and I just assumed the boom and bust cycle was normal. Initially, I didn't know Nicole was into knives. We were introduced by a mutual friend, Crystal, whom I met during a community college course. At first, Nicole and I bonded over shared interests like music, art, outdoor activities, antiquing, wine, food and cooking. We started dating and eventually went on a camping and hiking trip. During the trip she used a knife to split the kindling and pointed it toward herself. I warned her to be careful, but she told me to relax, saying she did it all the time. She asked if I wanted to try and I admitted that I didn't like knives. Later, as we drank by the fire and talked, I opened up about my trauma. She promised to protect me and I remember that clearly because I had a mental image of her defending me from a mugger, and I joked that she was my hero. This was the first time I brought up my trauma, and neither of us were drunk at the time. My knife issues typically don't impact my daily life except to make me more apt to be very slow in the kitchen when chopping things. It doesn't seem like abuse, especially when we're good. When it's bad, it's really rough. I don't really have any other baseline as I was a late bloomer dating-wise. My dad always said that you should both give 110% in a relationship, but everyone argues. I thought working through the rough patches was normal. That's also why I was preparing to apologize, because it takes two in an argument, so I'm responsible as well and need to apologize for my part. In this case, ruining the night with my reaction. I did receive treatment in order to help me deal with the first event that led to my knife phobia. When it initially happened, it was much worse. I couldn't bear for someone to point a knife in the direction of another human being, or even just to hear certain songs on the radio or smell particular aromas that would bring back memories of the occurrence. Though obviously not enough to stay with her and put up with her knife fusing, I've made improvement. I will admit that I've regressed a little. I now have greater anxiety during the night, have trouble falling asleep, and have nightmares more frequently. For this reason, when she stated I was exaggerating, I began to believe her. Also concerning the fidgeting, it's not a constant thing. Sometimes she'd go weeks without pulling the knife out. Sometimes she'd complain that I only focus on the fact she had used the knife, versus how long she had abstained, which seems reasonable to point out. Update 2, June 16, 2024, 3 years later. There's previous information in my profile concerning a post I made on AITA a few years ago. I came to Reddit about my girlfriend and her knife prank. It's been a long while since, and I was uncertain if I could update here or there or wherever. Roll this back over a decade ago for more background. When I was a preteen, we experienced a home invasion that resulted in my mother and dog dying and left me with a lifelong phobia of knives and anxiety surrounding blood and break-ins. Directly following the break-in, I was unable to handle a knife being pointed at another living creature. My brain caught on to stupid things and connected them to the events and made them into triggers. Mom's perfume. The sound of glass shattering or a door banging open. A song that was playing at the time. Even now I still hate the song, but at least it doesn't trigger a flashback anymore. Blood on beige carpet featured prominently in my nightmares. I worked extensively with a therapist to process what happened and what I'd seen. Recovery took years of therapy, weeks of inpatient care, medication to help with the nightmares, PTSD, depression and anxiety. We sold the house as soon as we could. I moved out of state as soon as I could. I kept up with therapy and continued to take my medication. My aversion to knives became something minor in how it impacted my life. I was careful in the kitchen and I certainly didn't search out knife throwing competitions, but it was under control in my normal daily life. It helped that everything seemed to be coming together. I made new friends, I was balancing work and school, I'd just met the girl who'd become my first long-term adult girlfriend. I know now it was just the honeymoon phase, but it felt like we were progressing well even once infatuation wore off. We stood together through highs and lows and the mediocre middle ground where there's nothing exciting, just the mundane. I thought that was the marker of a steady relationship, to be able to stick together even after the excitement of a new relationship has faded. We went on a few trips together, driving across state lines to meet her family or flying back to see my dad. On one of our trips we went camping and my fear of knives got brought up. That led to the break-in getting brought up. She seemed to care at the time, even promising to protect me if something ever happened and offering to help install a camera in my apartment. After the camping trip, I don't know if it was always there and I noticed it more after or what, but she started to be more obviously into knives. Practicing tricks in front of me, showing videos to me, starting a collection. She even asked for a knife for her birthday that year, showing me exactly which one she wanted. Before, she was into camping. Into guns, which ironically I have zero issue with, and how to forage, make shelter, purify water, basic survival stuff and artillery and tanks. She did multiple courses about military history in college and busted out the textbooks sometimes if she remembered something she thought I would find interesting. But suddenly it seemed like her focus was on carving and skinning animals. On knife wounds and tricks and collecting and displaying knives. She started doing the tricks more often, in front of me, even when sitting next to me on the couch or at the dinner table. She would gesture with the knife, without thinking, and even point it at me. Again, one of my major triggers being knives pointed at people or animals. She started sending me videos of news clips of other break-ins, or news reports of robberies ending in murder, between a bunch of other funny videos or pictures, so checking Snapchat became a game of Russian roulette. If I didn't check the links sent through text, she'd keep sending them and ask what I thought. She'd forget she had the knife in hand when she came up to me, sometimes from behind. My nightmares came back. My anxiety got worse. No matter how often I reminded her to please stop playing with the knife in front of me, or at least not next to me, she would always forget after a little bit. Some part of me refuses to believe there's no way she risked bodily harm just to unnerve me. It came to a head when she pulled a prank where she pretended to cut off a finger. We had a huge fight, our biggest one yet. I wish I'd acted differently and hadn't stormed out, but I did. There's a lot about my time with Nicole I would do differently in hindsight. I was so sure I'd just break up with her for good. I don't know why I didn't stay broken up with her. When I did it first, I did it alone because my friend Jack rolled his eyes and called me a pussy for wanting back up. So I did it in a coffee shop instead, hoping the public eye could be my backup. Nicole stared at me with this affronted expression and it was like I couldn't find the words anymore. Her eyes were huge and wide and hateful. Like I've never seen anyone glare at me like that. She gripped onto the cup like she was going to throw it at me. I had it in my head to bolt the second she moved because I could see it so clearly. But then she started crying. Loudly. And kept asking why I would do this to her and that she hoped I found happiness with someone better since she clearly wasn't enough for me despite doing everything to be a good girlfriend. I felt like shit and people were staring, so I wished her well and asked if she wanted me to call a friend, but she told me to leave her the fuck alone, so I did. I hate how I handled the breakup, but it felt in the moment like autopilot. In short order, I lost the support of our mutual friends who had become my only friends during my relationship with Nicole, Which I understand as they knew her for much longer. Jack actually confronted me and called me a piece of shit for embarrassing her like that in public. Calling me trash for leaving her sobbing alone and not even offering her a ride home. He wouldn't listen to my explanations and said I could excuse myself, but everyone now knew what kind of guy I really am. People at work mentioned how sad it was that we broke up. I didn't feel like it was the place to explain my reasoning, and after the confrontation with Jack I didn't feel like I had a right to. I felt like crap, like a shit person, and I felt numb. I tried to move on, to find a new normal. After about a month of us being broken up, she called me and begged for me to come over to help her. She was scared she'd hurt herself. I went to her immediately. I held her all night, helped her wash her hair after days of not being able to bring herself to. She admitted she'd done a horrible thing and that she couldn't stand how she'd treated me, that she wished she could go back and change so we could still be together. Didn't know how to address that, so I just stayed with her the whole night, and the next day at work she came by to drop off a homemade lunch and to thank me for being there for her. I stupidly let myself get sucked back in. I get that it's my fault. Coffee in the morning became dinner and drinks out became movie nights and going to shows and flea markets together because we still had similar interests. One time she even noticed a booth with knives and directed us away, and while yes it wasn't necessary as I could see a knife display and not be freaked out, it was a nice gesture because before she would have gone there and either bought one herself or asked me to buy it for her, one of multiple changes that made me think maybe she was truly making an effort. That at least maybe we could be friends again. I started to get invited back into the group somewhat. 2 months later, she kissed me. We were both drunk and it didn't go any further. I didn't bring it up because I thought she didn't remember. However, she later approached me, asking if there was any chance of salvaging our relationship, insisting that she had changed and things would be better now. Maybe, I reasoned. Since she had been so kind, I decided to stay, and we ended up getting back together. Although Jack continued to avoid talking to me and Crystal had ceased interacting with everyone, I was allowed to rejoin the friend group in its entirety. Although it was awkward at first, we quickly pretended that we had never stopped being friends. Returning to normal felt amazing. It was as though a burden had been lifted off my chest and I could breathe at last. It was nice for a while. She was so careful about the knife thing and it really did feel so normal and steady. Sure, we had small fights, but we always made up shortly after and she'd be overwhelmingly loving after the fact. It felt like it was before, so it felt normal. I can't pinpoint when it started to creep back, but maybe when she started watching documentaries on her phone with the sound up high while sitting next to me, or when she'd poke or grab me while I was cutting up dinner then laugh at my startled response. Or she'd scoff if I teared up watching or reading something then tell me later that it was out of fondness not exasperation and I really needed to stop reading so much into it. Or she'd yell at me for forgetting something that she never even told me about and then the next day she'd get frustrated that I didn't insist properly, that she was mistaken. Like it was all small things that on their own weren't even that big of a deal and I didn't feel like I could just speak up about it or else I was nitpicking her. In hindsight I was making excuses and clinging to when she was nice to me, trying to do anything to make sure we just stayed happy and without bumps. Part of it was that I knew now that I'd be alone, that no one would understand why I'd throw away a good relationship, that being with her was the best thing that could ever happen to me. We moved in together 4 months after getting back together. She hinted that it was the only way to prove I had forgiven her and that we could move on and be happy. She insisted I move into her place because it was easier to move an apartment into a house than the other way around. It constantly felt like she was holding that night she was suicidal over me against me, like one wrong move from me and maybe next time she wouldn't call for help. When we had fights, she paced through the house flicking a knife, looping from the bedroom to the living room to the office. She said every argument was because I was holding a grudge over the prank, and that we wouldn't be arguing if I just grew up and stopped taking out my trauma on her. She'd tell me not to piss her off because it would be too easy for her to make a mistake and no one would think twice about what happened. A few times she'd gone on a rampage, overturning tables and throwing glasses into the sink and dishwasher, saying we were done for good. The next day, she would blow up my phone begging me to talk things out or have her friends encourage me to swallow my pride and go back to her because she was miserable without me and trying so hard. Or she'd wake me with a kiss after making me sleep on the couch as if the night before never happened. If I asked about the night before, the fight would start all over again, but this time it'd be my fault because she was trying to move on while I was holding a grudge. The following nearly 10 months were the most terrifying, anxiety-riddled period of my life, and I only had myself to blame. Coming home from work, I puked my guts out more than a few times on the way just because I didn't want to go back to her. I felt trapped. She threw away the blanket my mother had knitted me for my crib because it was dirty. It wasn't dirty, it was a knit blanket that had been repaired repeatedly and hand-washed frequently. She accidentally put it through the wash and destroyed it, then bought a completely different throw blanket as a replacement and got mad when I didn't consider the matter resolved. She pulled another prank, this time with a fake positive pregnancy test, and berated me for not being overjoyed. Instead of being excited, I immediately started panicking about the cost, raising a child in our dysfunctional relationship and handling the stress. I feel like she wanted me to be happy so that she could crush my joy, and was angry that I didn't meet her expectations. That night, she threatened me with a knife, pointing it at me and saying she should just snip me right then since I didn't want to have kids with her. She then held me as I sobbed, going into a panic. I didn't want her touching me, but I didn't know what else to do but let her and apologize to her. Another time, she put the knife to her own throat during a fight, saying I clearly wanted her to kill herself. She didn't stop until I screamed at her, begging her to stop. Sometimes, when driving, she'd start speeding and swerving. Or closing her eyes while on the highway, saying my fear meant I didn't trust her. The worst part wasn't the anxiety and terror though. It was when she was sweet and caring. For example, she always went all out for my birthday or anniversaries or Christmas, with thoughtful gifts, except for the year where she kicked me out for the evening after throwing some decorations at the wall because they stopped working, for which she blamed me because I put them up. She was sweet and gentle one day, or even for a week or two, only to slowly start ramping up the tension until she exploded yet again. She had an uncanny ability to blame me in ways that made me feel responsible for her emotions and for forcing her to react violently. When we drove out to visit my dad for Easter, things started to change. Dad was concerned about how quiet I'd become and that I hadn't come for Thanksgiving or Christmas or even called on NYE like I used to. That I looked tired, unhappy and thin. Nicole was on her best behavior the whole time and even left her knives in the car, even tried to get everyone to focus on the engagement ring, but Dad still saw something was wrong. For 3 weeks he kept trying to contact me, but she wouldn't let me talk without her in the room, and she checked my phone anytime she left me alone and checked the records online to see if I had deleted any calls. Eventually I managed to get a burner phone and hid it at work, which allowed me to talk to my dad freely. He flew over with my uncle and they helped me gather my stuff from her house. When Nicole started sobbing and begging me to stay, my uncle kept her from the kitchen knives and had his phone ready to call 911 if she tried to hurt herself or us. When Nicole started to insist I was taking her stuff too, even though I was only taking things either I brought with me or I bought for me, I just let it go. She got to keep a few sentimental items of mine and the loss hurt still, but the most important ones I was able to take, like I was able to get all my documentation and cards out of her house. I didn't even bother with the ring. It was just money and she was already acting up. Uncle drove my car home while Dad had me fly with him. I'm ashamed to admit that the months directly following the breakup were almost worse than the time I spent with her, because I was out of survival mode and I couldn't force myself to function the way I used to. I felt like a parasite on my father. Unable to get my shit together. Falling apart over nothing. Being so volatile it frightened me. I'm in therapy again. Sometimes I feel better, like I can see a way forward, but then I feel like I'm back in the thick of it and I'll never go back to normal and I'm permanently broken. Worse, every time I cry or get triggered or have a flashback, I can still hear her voice in my head calling me over emotional and too sensitive, that I'd be fine by now if I just got over myself, that what I went through wasn't that bad. She sent mail to my dad's house for a while, threatening letters and pleas for me to see reason and stop overreacting. Pictures of us that were sentimental, guilt trips. At first I couldn't get a restraining order right away against her because I moved, something about the jurisdictions and courts, but when she sent those letters it helped at least make sure she couldn't continue to contact me. I found my old laptop a while ago and it had the password pre-populated. It wouldn't leave my mind, especially when I read what people were saying. Right now I'm just rambling to get my head straight, to be honest, but my DMs were full of people saying how the sex must be amazing. How stupid guys get when they want to stick their dick in something, that I don't have balls or a backbone clearly and I just need to man up. Basically everything I told myself to remind me of what I did to deserve being stuck with her. I don't know if I can muster the courage to address any responses to them, but I really just want to tie up this loose end in my life so maybe I can stop rehashing it mentally and finally move on. I might also give my therapist the notebook I kept of Nicole's abuse, but I haven't wanted to even look for it. There's still a box of shit that I haven't opened up because it's all fucked with my head so much. What I wish I knew at the start of all this shit was that any amount of genuine discomfort isn't an acceptable price in a relationship and you're allowed to stop giving them more chances even if they're trying and seem sorry. You're not obligated to help people change, even if you love them, even if they do slightly better.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.